Carl Jung discovered something that terrified him about people who take life too seriously. They are building a psychological bomb inside themselves, and when it finally goes off, the explosion is devastating. In his clinical practice, Jung documented patients who lived by rigid rules and perfect appearances. They never laughed at themselves, never made mistakes, never showed weakness. They were models of seriousness and control. But Jung noticed something disturbing. These perfectly serious people consistently ended up in his office after complete psychological breakdowns, and what he discovered about the relationship between seriousness and mental health changed psychology forever. What happens to your mind when you refuse to play? When you turn life into an endless performance of perfection? Jung found the answer, and it is more dangerous than anyone expected, because the people who take themselves most seriously are walking toward an invisible cliff, and they have no idea how close they are to the edge. The problem starts with something Jung called the persona. This is the mask you wear in public, the version of yourself you present to the world, your professional face, your social personality, your carefully managed image. Everyone has a persona. That is normal and necessary. But here is where it becomes dangerous. Some people do not just wear the mask. They become the mask. They identify so completely with their perfect public image that they forget there is anything underneath. Jung called this the perfect person problem, and it creates a psychological trap that destroys people from the inside out. Think about someone who is always put together, always appropriate, always saying the right thing. They never have bad days. They never lose control. They never show anything messy or human or real. On the surface, they seem like they have life figured out. But Jung discovered what is really happening beneath that perfect exterior. Every time you reject a part of yourself to maintain your serious image, that rejected part does not disappear. It goes into your unconscious mind, into what Jung called the shadow. Your shadow is everything you cannot accept about yourself. The parts you think are too childish, too playful, too silly, too spontaneous. When you take life too seriously, you are constantly rejecting these aspects of yourself. You are feeding them into the shadow like logs into a furnace. And here is the terrifying part. The shadow accumulates pressure. Jung compared it to steam building up in a sealed container. The more you repress, the more pressure builds. The longer you maintain your perfectly serious facade, the more dangerous the contents of your unconscious become. Because that pressure has to go somewhere. And when it finally releases, Jung documented exactly what happens. He called these events shadow eruptions. A shadow eruption is when all your repressed content explodes outward in ways you cannot control. The perfectly calm person suddenly rages over something tiny. The always composed professional has a complete meltdown. The person who never makes mistakes suddenly sabotages everything they have built. These are not random breakdowns. They are the inevitable result of taking yourself too seriously for too long. Your shadow is demanding to be acknowledged. And if you will not acknowledge it consciously, it will force its way out unconsciously. Jung observed this pattern again and again in his practice. The more rigid and serious the persona, the more chaotic and destructive the eventual shadow eruption. The perfectionist who suddenly becomes reckless, the moral authority who gets caught in scandal, the control freak whose life falls apart in spectacular fashion. This is what happens when you refuse to play with life. When everything becomes a serious performance that must be managed and controlled. You are not avoiding problems. You are creating a psychological time bomb. But the danger of excessive seriousness goes even deeper than shadow eruptions, because taking yourself too seriously creates another deadly trap that Jung identified. He called it ego inflation. When you identify completely with your serious, perfect persona, something strange happens to your sense of self. You start to believe you actually are superior to others, that your way of being is the right way. that your seriousness makes you more mature, more responsible, more evolved than people who still know how to laugh at themselves. This is ego inflation, and it is one of the most dangerous psychological states Jung ever documented, because inflated people lose something essential. They lose psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt, to change, to see other perspectives becomes impossible. They become rigid and brittle, convinced of their own righteousness, while blind to their own shadow. Jung noticed that inflated people always operate with absolute certainty. They never doubt their own motivations. They never question their own perceptions. This certainty feels like strength, but it is actually profound weakness. Because psychological health requires the ability to hold uncertainty, to question yourself, to remain open to being wrong. When you take life too seriously, you lose this capacity. Everything becomes black and white. You become immune to feedback, unable to see your own blind spots, trapped in your inflated sense of who you think you are. This creates what Jung called a psychological prison. You have locked yourself inside your own serious self-image, and the key to freedom is the very thing you have rejected: play, humor, lightness, the ability to laugh at yourself. Jung discovered something remarkable about the patients who successfully escaped this prison. They all learned to reintegrate what he called the child archetype. The child archetype is not about being immature or irresponsible. It represents something much deeper: spontaneity, curiosity, the ability to find joy without needing a reason, the capacity to play for no other purpose than the pleasure of playing itself. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. When you take life too seriously, you exile the child completely. You tell yourself that play is a waste of time, that spontaneity is dangerous, that joy without productivity is meaningless. You reject everything the child represents in favor of constant seriousness and purpose. But Jung realized the child archetype contains something you desperately need. It holds your connection to future potential, to possibility, to the part of you that can still grow and change and become something new. Without the child, you become stuck, fixed in your serious patterns with no ability to evolve. The child is not about going backward into immaturity. It is about moving forward into genuine development. But that development requires the very qualities that serious people reject: openness, playfulness, the willingness to try new things without knowing if they will work. This is why Jung said the most dangerous thing about excessive seriousness is not what it creates, it is what it prevents. It prevents you from becoming who you could be. It locks you into who you already are, forever performing the same serious role while your potential for growth remains trapped in your shadow. So how do you escape this trap? How do you recover the lightness you have lost without abandoning responsibility? Jung discovered the answer, and it involves something that seems impossibly simple: humor, not joke-telling or comedy, but genuine self-mockery, the ability to laugh at your own self-importance. Humor is not just entertainment, it is a psychological tool for shadow integration. When you laugh at yourself, something profound happens. Your ego temporarily relaxes its grip. The rigid boundaries of your persona soften. For just a moment, you stop taking yourself seriously, and in that moment, you can see the parts of yourself you have been rejecting. Self-mockery is especially powerful because it directly attacks ego inflation. When you can genuinely laugh at your own pretensions, your own mistakes, your own absurdities, you deflate the inflated ego. You remind yourself that you are human, flawed, ridiculous in many ways, just like everyone else. Jung noticed that people who could laugh at themselves almost never experienced catastrophic shadow eruptions, because humor provides a release valve for all that accumulated pressure. Instead of building up until it explodes, the tension releases gradually through laughter, through not taking everything so seriously, through maintaining perspective on your own importance. But here is what makes humor so challenging for serious people. Humor requires uncertainty. It lives in ambiguity. A joke only works because it holds two contradictory meanings at once. This is the opposite of how serious people want to experience life. They want certainty, clear answers, definite meanings. This is why Jung connected excessive seriousness to psychological danger, because life itself is fundamentally ambiguous. Reality is complex, paradoxical, full of contradictions that cannot be resolved through seriousness and control. The people who take life too seriously are trying to force certainty onto a world that is inherently uncertain. And this creates unbearable psychological tension, because you are constantly fighting against the basic nature of existence. You need everything to be clear and controlled and serious. But life keeps being messy and unpredictable and absurd. The gap between what you need reality to be and what reality actually is becomes a source of constant suffering. Jung noticed this suffering most intensely in people trapped in what he called repetition compulsions. These are people who keep creating the same painful dramas in their lives over and over without realizing they are the ones orchestrating them. And here is the connection to seriousness. When you take your life story too seriously, you become trapped in that story. You keep replaying the same painful patterns because that is the narrative you have committed to. The serious victim, the serious martyr, the serious person who life keeps betraying. These dramatic narratives feel important and meaningful when you are inside them, but Jung realized they are unconscious scripts that keep you stuck. And the only way out is to stop taking your own drama so seriously, to step back and see the absurdity of how you keep casting yourself in the same role, recruiting other people to play the same parts, staging the same tragedy again and again. When you can laugh at your own repetitive patterns, something shifts. The drama loses its grip. You stop unconsciously creating situations that confirm your serious story about how life works. You become free to write a new story, or better yet, to stop living as if your life is a story that must be managed and controlled at all. This brings us to what Jung considered the deepest wisdom about seriousness. The integrated person is not someone who becomes less serious by becoming more frivolous. The integrated person learns to be simultaneously committed to life and detached from the ego's investment in outcomes. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. Jung saw patients who tried to solve their seriousness problem by abandoning all responsibility. They became chaotic, impulsive, using play as an escape from commitment. This is not integration. This is just swinging from one extreme to another. Real integration means you care deeply about what you do. You work with discipline and dedication. You honor your responsibilities. But underneath all that commitment, there is a quality of lightness, a sense of irony about your own importance, an understanding that you are playing a role without being trapped by that role. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the integrated relationship between the persona and the self. You wear the mask consciously, knowing it is a mask. You play your part seriously while remembering it is a part you are playing. This creates a kind of psychological freedom that people who take themselves too seriously can never access, because when you are not rigidly identified with your serious self-image, you become unbreakable. Criticism cannot devastate you because you already know your flaws and can laugh at them. Failure cannot destroy you because you never believed your own inflated self-importance. Uncertainty cannot paralyze you because you have learned to play with possibilities instead of demanding certainty. Jung documented this state in his own life. During his confrontation with the unconscious between 1913 and 1919, he experienced visions and fantasies that could have been interpreted as psychosis. But Jung approached these experiences with a quality he called active imagination. He played with the images his unconscious produced. He entered into dialogue with them. He treated the process with both seriousness and a kind of playful curiosity. This is what saved him. If he had taken the experiences too seriously, identifying completely with the archetypal contents that emerged, he would have become inflated and possibly psychotic. If he had not taken them seriously enough, dismissing them as meaningless, he would have learned nothing. But by holding both seriousness and play together, he transformed potential madness into profound insight. This is the secret Jung discovered. The deepest engagement with life requires lightness. Not because life is not important, but because taking yourself too seriously makes you rigid and fragile. It cuts you off from the very sources of creativity, growth, and genuine transformation. Play is not the opposite of seriousness. Play is what allows you to be serious about the right things without becoming trapped in ego identification. When you can play with ideas, you become truly creative. When you can play with your own personality, you become truly flexible. When you can play with life's uncertainties, you become truly resilient. The ultimate danger of taking life too seriously is not dramatic breakdown. It is that you will never fully live. You will spend your existence managing your image, controlling your performance, maintaining your serious facade. All the potential locked in your shadow will remain forever unexpressed. Jung saw this as psychological death, the death of possibility, spontaneity, and the capacity to be surprised by yourself and by life. This is why integration of play is essential for psychological completion. The solution is not to become less committed or less responsible. The solution is to learn what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites together without being torn apart by them, to be both serious and playful, both committed and detached, both disciplined and spontaneous. This sounds like a paradox. How can you be serious and not serious at the same time? But Jung discovered that the most psychologically healthy people all shared this quality. They took their work seriously, but not themselves seriously. They engaged fully with life while maintaining a cosmic sense of humor about their own importance. This is the wisdom Jung offered. Life is serious business. Consciousness is precious. Your choices matter. But you, the ego trying to control it all, are not as important as you think you are. When you can laugh at that gap between the significance of existence and the insignificance of your ego, you find freedom. The people who cannot laugh at themselves are always one crisis away from catastrophe, because they have built their entire identity on taking themselves seriously. When that serious self-image is threatened, they have nothing to fall back on. Their whole world collapses. But the people who have learned to play with life, who can mock their own pretensions while still honoring their deepest values, these people are psychologically indestructible. Not because nothing can hurt them, but because they never fully identified with the part that can be hurt. They know they are more than their serious persona, more than their carefully managed image, more than their need to be right or important or impressive. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not becoming more serious, but becoming more whole. And wholeness always includes the parts you rejected, the playfulness, the spontaneity, the capacity to be silly and absurd and gloriously ridiculous. When you stop taking life too seriously, you do not become less. You become more human, more flexible, more alive. You recover the parts of yourself that got locked away when you decided that everything had to be controlled and managed and serious. This is Jung's challenge to you. Look at how seriously you take yourself. Notice where you have become rigid in your need to be right. to be impressive, to maintain your perfect image. See the ways you have rejected play and humor and lightness in favor of constant seriousness. And then try something revolutionary. Laugh at yourself, not in a cruel way, not in self-hatred, but with genuine amusement at your own self-importance. Mock your own pretensions. See the absurdity in how seriously you take things that ultimately do not matter as much as you think they do. This is not giving up on life. This is engaging with life more fully. Because when you are not trapped in your serious ego, you become available for real experience, real growth, real transformation. Jung's final insight about seriousness was this: the people who take themselves most seriously are actually the most afraid. They are terrified of being seen as imperfect, as flawed, as human. So they construct a rigid persona of seriousness to hide behind. They use their inflated self-importance as armor against vulnerability. But that armor becomes a prison. It protects you from being fully seen, but it also prevents you from fully living. The paradox is that the moment you can laugh at yourself, the moment you stop taking your image so seriously, you become more authentic, more real, more capable of genuine connection with others and with life itself. This is why Jung said, the shortest distance to psychological wholeness is through humor, not because life is a joke, but because taking yourself too seriously is the joke, the cosmic joke that everyone plays on themselves until they finally get it. So here is your invitation. Stop performing seriousness. Stop using rigid self-control as proof of superiority. Stop rejecting the playful, spontaneous parts of yourself. Let the child back in, not to become immature, but to recover your capacity for wonder, joy, and engagement with life that is not constantly filtered through your need to be impressive. Because at the end of your life, the question will be how fully you lived, how much potential you expressed, how much genuine joy you experienced, and you cannot answer that question well while trapped in the prison of constant seriousness, constantly performing perfection, constantly rejecting your own humanity. You cannot become whole while rejecting the parts of yourself that know how to play. Jung offered you a path out of that prison. It starts with something impossibly simple. Laugh at yourself. Take life seriously, but yourself lightly. Engage fully while holding your own importance loosely. Honor what truly matters without inflating your ego. This is not weakness at all. This is the deepest strength. Because the person who can laugh at their own absurdity while still honoring what truly matters has found the secret Jung spent his life discovering. Life is too important to take too seriously. So put it down, laugh, play, see the cosmic absurdity in how seriously you have been taking yourself. And in that moment of genuine humor, you might discover something profound. Freedom, the freedom to be fully human instead of pretending to be perfectly serious, perfectly controlled, perfectly right about everything all the time. That freedom is what Jung offered, not through complex theories, but through the simplest revolutionary act. Learning to laugh at yourself while taking life seriously. That is the integration he discovered. If this resonated with you, comment about one way you take yourself too seriously. Sometimes naming it is the first step to laughing at it. Subscribe for more content that challenges you to see yourself differently. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.